Guys, and welcome to my early prediction for an election which will be happening later this year, which will tell a lot about whether right-wing coalition governments can hold in the modern day. Today, we're going to talk about New Zealand. So for some background, 3 years ago at the last New Zealand general election, the centre-left Labour Party lost their majority to a coalition of the National Party of New Zealand, the ACT Party of New Zealand, which is more right-wing libertarian, and then New Zealand First Party, which is a little bit syncretic but generally conservative-leaning. You put all of them together, they did win by quite a bit. Now, New Zealand uses basically proportional representation. There's a couple of differences, but it is mostly just proportional representation. So you would think that after such a big win, that general coalition between the National, ACT and New Zealand First parties would hold. However, they all came to power basically on the promise that we're going to fix the economy, we're going to make sure there's not hyperinflation anymore. Well, they haven't really done a great job at that, and the New Zealand economy has continued to get worse. All of these parties campaigned very strongly on reducing crime. The latest statistics are yet to come out, but overall, over that term, violent crime especially has increased a lot in New Zealand, and they are very tough on crime. Strong policing policy hasn't really fixed any of that. So if we're going forward now to the 2026 election, we need to look at where each party is polling. And we can see centre-right National Party down, centre-left Labour Party going up. So it does seem very likely at this point that a Labour Party will beat the National Party in terms of who is the largest. The question is, how does everyone else perform? So generally, the Green Party is the biggest other sort of progressive party, other than the Labour Party. They generally poll between 10 and 15%. They'll be hoping for a good result. So the reality there is, what right-wing smaller parties can the Nationals get the support of? Now, this yellow line here, that's the ACT Party. They seem to be going down a bit over the course of a term. So if the results were just Labour plus the Green Party and then National plus the ACT Party, that Labour coalition would win, except the New Zealand First Party, which isn't a coalition with National and ACT, has started to tick up, getting now over 10% in the polls, and they could possibly reach as high as 15% on election day. So the question is there, does the National Party still stick does New Zealand First Party still stick with the Nationals, or will they go in a coalition with Labour? Between 2017 and 2020, there was a Labour, Green, New Zealand First coalition government. So that idea might not necessarily hold that New Zealand First is always going to stick with the right. Of course, there is an ideological leaning. However, essentially what a lot of the New Zealand First party spokespeople have said is, we're not ruling anything out at this point. So I think there's two ways this goes down. One of them is National plus ACT doesn't get a majority, and Labour plus Green does not get a majority, under which case it comes down to the New Zealand First Party and who they decide to work with. I think that's still more likely to lean towards the right-wing coalition, but if, say, Labour plus Green are maybe 1 or 2 seats off majority, I think maybe New Zealand First will see which way the wind's blowing and maybe form a coalition with them. I think the other possibility is there might be enough of a shift left that Labour plus the Green Party can win majority. Do I think that's likely? I don't know. Then you see this maroon line here. That's a party called Te Pāti Māori, which is a party focused on Maori rights. And while they don't really get a lot of votes nationwide, they do win quite a few individual constituencies, so they generally get into parliament anyway, even without, meeting 5% threshold for proportional representation. New Zealand is quite complicated with its electoral system, so yeah, they could pick up a few extra seats for a sort of progressive coalition. And then this teal line here is called the Opportunities Party, so they're a sort of centrist party, and they've recently ticked up to averaging about 3% in the polls. So there's a question, where will they go? I think they might look ideologically, just Labour being sort of centre-left is probably ideologically closer to them rather than the Nationals, which have gone a lot further to the right, trying to pick up votes from New Zealand First and ACT, and still losing in that respect. So it should be interesting to see how things go, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a mess. So if we are looking at these polls here, these are generally showing if New Zealand First works with ACT and National, and if Labour, Green and Te Pāti Māori are all right in there competing. This is measuring the two sort of traditional blocks in New Zealand politics, sort of left, sort of right. Yeah, that right coalition has generally held a lead. However, starting from about a year ago, it really narrowed down, and the government hasn't really been able to get through. And the Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon from the National Party, he called a couple of leadership, I think he called one leadership vote, maybe he called some others, basically show my party has got some confidence in me, so I can keep leading them. But the actual results of the leadership votes aren't really published, but I think the fact that he's under some degree of stress will probably get some people in the party concerned. So I suppose we also have a possibility that the National Party replaces their leader. However, there isn't really any popular figures that the Nationals can put in that spot, so I don't really know what they do. But, you know, come November later this year, I think we're going to see a bit of a mess in a New Zealand election.